Ethan Kane had lived alone for so long that the sound of his own voice sometimes startled him. 20 years had passed since the colony ship crashed on this empty planet. 20 years since he last saw another human face. The land around him was dry and cold, with twisted trees that groaned in the wind. His small cabin, made from the wreckage of the old ship, stood on the edge of a wide valley. It was the only shelter for miles. Every day was the same for him: hunting small animals, fixing broken tools, checking the radio that had never once answered back. At night he would sit by the small fire, staring at the shadows, wondering if the universe had forgotten him completely. The radio was his only link to the outside world. He had kept it powered with scavenged batteries and makeshift solar panels. Every night before sleeping, he would turn the dial, listening for anything that might break the endless static. Sometimes he thought he heard faint voices, but they always vanished before he could answer. It was a routine he could not abandon. Even though a part of him knew no one was coming, his beard had grown white at the edges. His hands were scarred from years of survival work, yet his body remained strong. Loneliness had sharpened his instincts, taught him to notice even the smallest changes in the wind or in the forest around him. He had learned to survive on little food, to sleep lightly, to stay ready for danger, even when there was none. On that night, the wind was unusually still. The forest outside seemed to be holding its breath. Ethan sat by the fire, the radio buzzing faintly on the table. He was sharpening his old hunting knife when he heard it, a sound so faint it almost blended with the creak of the cabin. It was the sound of footsteps, not the heavy step of a beast, but light, deliberate, careful. His heart beat faster. 20 years alone, and now something was walking toward his home. He reached for his rifle, the metal cold in his hands. He stepped slowly to the door, every movement silent. He pushed it open just enough to see outside. The moon cast silver light over the valley. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and there, moving between the twisted trees, was a figure. It was tall, but not as tall as a human man. The figure's body shimmered faintly, as though the skin caught the moonlight in an unnatural way. The steps were slow, unsteady, as if the stranger was injured. Ethan held his breath, watching. The figure stumbled, caught itself on a tree, and then stepped into a patch of light. He saw her face. It was not human. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes glowing faint blue like the light of frozen stars. She wore what looked like a torn survival suit, its fabric ripped and burned in places. Her breathing was heavy, each inhale shaking her thin frame. She lifted her head, scanning the area as if searching for someone. Then her gaze locked on him for a long moment. Neither of them moved, the air between them tense and filled with unspoken questions. Then, slowly, she took a few more steps forward. Her knees buckled and she collapsed into the cold dirt. Ethan didn't move at first, unsure if this was a trick. His instincts told him to be cautious, but something in the way she fell weak, desperate, made him lower his rifle. He moved to her side, crouching. Her skin was cool to the touch, her breathing ragged. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. He leaned closer. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the words were clear. Now, take me, human. The sentence hit him like a shock. His mind raced. He didn't know what she meant. Was it a plea for help? A command? Something else entirely? He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the trees, half expecting to see others hiding in the shadows. But the forest remained still. Her eyes met his again, and in them he saw something unexpected. Not fear, but trust. It was strange. After all, she didn't know him. She couldn't know what kind of man he was. Yet she had come to him, out of all the empty places on this dead planet, she had found his lonely cabin. Ethan hesitated for only a moment more before lifting her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile. He carried her back toward the cabin, the silence of the night pressing in on them. He could feel her shallow breaths against his chest. Inside, he set her gently on his small cot, covered her with a rough blanket, and knelt beside her, up close. He could see her injuries, faint burns on her arms, a deep cut along her leg. She smelled faintly of metal and smoke. He poured her a cup of water, holding it to her lips. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Finally, she whispered again, her voice just as soft. "They will come for me." Ethan's grip tightened on the cup. He didn't know who they were, but he understood the danger in her tone. He glanced at the door, at the rifle leaning against the wall. His quiet life, his long, empty years, were over. Something had just stepped into his world, something that would change everything. Outside, the wind began to move again, rattling the old cabin walls. But it wasn't the wind Ethan feared now. It was the question he could not answer. Who was this alien woman? And why had she come to him after 20 years of silence? The night felt heavier, charged with something he hadn't felt in decades. He didn't know if it was hope or danger. But he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. Ethan sat beside the cot, watching the alien woman as she rested. The glow in her eyes had dimmed, but it was still there, faint and strange. She breathed in shallow, careful pulls of air, her fingers clutching the blanket as if afraid it might vanish. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire in the corner crackled softly, filling the silence between them. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice rough from years of disuse. "Who are you?" he asked, the question simple but heavy. Her gaze shifted to him, studying his face as if deciding whether to answer. After a moment, she whispered, "My name is Soraya." The way she said it was smooth, her accent strange, each syllable carrying a weight that made him wonder how many languages she knew. She glanced toward the window, her eyes flicking to the dark forest outside. "I came here because I had no choice," she said. "My ship gone, my crew gone. Hunters follow me." The last word made Ethan's stomach tighten. "Hunters," he repeated, and she nodded slowly. "They take those who are valuable, and they kill the rest." Her voice dropped lower. "I ran. They followed. But I saw your light." Ethan leaned back, trying to process her words. He had survived on this planet for 20 years without seeing another living soul. And now, suddenly, an alien woman had appeared, running from enemies who sounded like killers. It was hard to believe, but there was no lie in her voice. He handed her another cup of water. She took it with trembling hands, drinking in small sips. Then she said, "I have been watching you." Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Watching me?" he repeated. She nodded, from a distance, for days, maybe weeks. "You live alone. You survive where most would die. You are strong." There was something in her tone, not just respect, but a hint of relief, as if finding him had been her plan all along. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had no experience with aliens beyond the crash, and even then, the only encounters were hostile. Yet here she was, speaking to him as though she knew him. He asked carefully, "Why come to me?" She hesitated, her fingers curling into the blanket. "Because I need someone who can stand against them," she said, her voice trembling now. "And I think you can, outside." The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound. Ethan stilled, tilting his head. It was distant but clear, a low, mechanical hum. He stood up, moving to the window. The forest was still, but the sound was there, moving slowly through the night. He recognized it, not from seeing it before, but from instinct. It was a hunting machine. Soraya's eyes followed his every move. "They are close," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "If they find me here, they will not stop until you are dead too." Ethan turned back to her. "Then we can't stay," he said, his mind already moving to the tunnels he hadn't used in years. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she fell. "You're hurt," he said, but she shook her head. "I can move. I must." Her determination was sharp. Cutting through her weakness, Ethan helped her to her feet. She leaned against him for balance, her arm hooked around his shoulder. They moved quickly, grabbing only the essentials: a bag of dried meat, a small water container, a handful of tools, and his old rifle. Ethan pushed open the back door, leading her toward the ridge behind the cabin. The moon was bright enough to light the path, the cold air biting at their skin as they moved through the trees. Soraya kept glancing over her shoulder, her ears slightly pointed and sharp, twitching at the faintest sounds. Ethan could feel her tension, and it infected him. The hum was growing louder now, closer. They reached the old hatch, hidden under a mound of earth and tangled roots. Ethan brushed away the dirt and pulled the lever. The hatch opened with a metallic groan. The smell of damp metal and dust rose up. "This will take us to the old mining tunnels," he explained. "They run deep under the hills. We can hide there." She nodded, her breathing quick but steady. They descended into darkness, Ethan closing the hatch behind them. The air inside was cold and stale. Their footsteps echoed faintly. Soraya's hand rested lightly on his arm as they moved deeper. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "You live here for 20 years. Yet you still fight to keep going." Ethan gave a small shrug. "You stop fighting, you stop living." She looked at him for a long moment, as if committing his words to memory. The tunnel walls dripped with condensation, the floor uneven under their boots. Ethan remembered the old maps in his head. Turning left at a split, ducking under collapse. Beams, the deeper they went, the more the hum above faded, replaced by the sound of water dripping in the dark. They reached a wide chamber lit only by the faint glow of his old flashlight. Ethan helped her sit on a rock. She touched her injured leg. Wincing, "We can't stay long," she said. "They will search everywhere. They always do." Ethan sat across from her, resting the rifle against his knee. "Then we'll keep moving," he replied. She studied him quietly for a while, then said something that caught him off guard. "You don't know it yet, but you've already saved me." Ethan frowned. "I haven't done anything." She shook her head slowly. "You opened your door. You didn't turn me away. That is more than most would do." There was a softness in her voice now, something that felt almost human. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he checked the rifle and listened to the distant silence, his mind already preparing for the next move. Soraya leaned back against the wall, her eyes closing for a moment. "Rest," Ethan said quietly. "You'll need your strength." She nodded faintly. And for the first time since she arrived, her body relaxed, but Ethan stayed awake, watching the tunnel entrance, because he knew the hunters were still out there, and this was only the beginning. Ethan had been awake for hours, sitting in the dim glow of his flashlight, the cold metal of the rifle resting against his leg. Soraya slept lightly. Every now and then, her ears twitched at distant sounds, her hand resting near a strange curved blade strapped to her thigh. Ethan could tell she was a fighter, but in her current state, she wouldn't stand long in a fight. He knew he had to be. Her strength for now, the tunnels around them were silent, except for the slow drip of water somewhere in the dark. Ethan had lived near these tunnels for years, but never stayed deep inside them. They were unstable. Some areas collapsed long ago. Others led into forgotten mining shafts. But tonight, they were the only place he could think of to hide. A faint vibration reached his feet first, like a distant thump carried through the stone. He froze, listening. Another came, then another. Steady and slow, Soraya's eyes opened instantly. She had felt it too. "They have entered the tunnels," she whispered, her voice steady but cold. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. They moved quickly, not running. But keeping a steady pace, Ethan knew speed could mean noise, and noise could mean death. His flashlight beam flicked across the walls, revealing old mining marks, broken. Cart's rusted tools left to rot. The air grew heavier as they descended deeper. Behind them, the faint red glow of light began to show. Soraya glanced back, her jaw tightening. "Drones," she murmured. "They search ahead for the hunters." Ethan cursed under his breath. Drones meant the hunters were close. They reached a narrow section where the ceiling had partially collapsed, forcing them to crawl. Ethan went first, pushing through the tight space, the rock scraping his back. He reached down to help Soraya through. She moved like liquid shadow, fast and controlled, even in her weakened state. Once through, they entered a wide chamber that split into 3 passages. Ethan stopped, trying to remember which way led to. The old maintenance level. Soraya pointed to the left without hesitation. "That way," she said. Ethan frowned. "How do you know?" She looked at him briefly. "I can smell the metal from the generators." They went left, the tunnel sloping downward, the air turning colder, the sound of the drones behind them growing louder. Ethan quickened his pace, Soraya keeping right. Beside him, her breathing calm despite the danger. A sudden flash of red light hit the walls ahead. Ethan ducked back, pulling Soraya with him. A drone hovered just around the corner, its camera eye scanning the tunnel with a soft, mechanical hum. Ethan pulled the hunting knife from his belt. Glancing at Soraya, she understood instantly. When the drone floated closer, Ethan lunged forward, jamming the knife into the side panel. Sparks burst out. The machine dropped with a sharp hiss. Ethan caught it before it hit the ground. Lowering it silently, Soraya gave him a small nod. No words needed, but the damage was done. The hunters would know one of their drones had been destroyed. Their pace quickened, boots crunching faintly on the stone floor. They reached the old generator room. The place was a mess of pipes, rusted machinery, and broken panels. Ethan knew it wasn't safe to stay, but it could serve as a temporary block. He and Soraya pushed an old cart across the entrance, just enough to slow anyone coming through. For a moment, they both caught their breath. Soraya leaned against the wall, her hand pressed to her side. Ethan noticed the faint shimmer of blood along her suit. "You're bleeding," he said. She glanced down but didn't flinch. "It's nothing," she replied, though her voice told him otherwise. The sound of metal striking stone echoed faintly in the distance. The hunters were breaking through obstacles as they moved. Ethan checked his rifle, loading the last of his ammunition. He didn't have much, but enough for a fight if it came. To that, Soraya stepped closer to him, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "If they catch me, they will not kill me right away," she said quietly. "They will take me to their masters, and you." She paused. "You will die before they even ask questions." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. "Then they won't catch you," he said simply. The noise from the tunnels grew sharper, closer. Ethan motioned toward the far exit of the generator room. "Come on," he said. They moved again, this time faster. The path ahead narrowing until they reached an old ladder leading up into darkness. Ethan climbed first, the rungs cold and wet under his hands. Soraya followed. Moving like a shadow right behind him, they emerged into a higher tunnel, one Ethan hadn't used in years. It was partially collapsed in places, but still passable. The air here was fresher, carrying the faint scent of the surface. But before they could move further, a deep, metallic voice echoed down the tunnel, speaking in a language Ethan didn't understand. Soraya froze, her eyes narrowing. "They're here," she said, and this time there was no calm in her voice, only urgency. Ethan raised his rifle. His heart beat steady now. 20 years alone had made him patient, but also ready. And if the hunters wanted her, they would have to go through him first, somewhere. In the dark ahead, footsteps began to echo, slow and deliberate. The hunt was no longer in the distance, it had found them. The footsteps in the dark were slow, heavy, and filled with purpose. Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. The sound of metal sliding against stone sent a chill through the stale air. Soraya crouched low beside him, her hand resting on her curved blade, her breathing controlled but sharp, like a predator ready to strike. The tunnel ahead was lit by faint red flashes, growing brighter with every step of the approaching hunters. Ethan knew the light meant scanners mapping the tunnels as they moved. He leaned closer to Soraya, whispering, "We can't run in a straight line. They'll track us easily." She nodded, eyes locked forward. They slipped into a side passage. Just before the red light reached them, the tunnel here was narrow. The walls pressing close on both sides, their boots crunched softly on the damp gravel. But in the silence, it sounded far too loud. From behind, the deep voice called out again, this time sharper. The words alien to Ethan, but heavy with command. Soraya's expression darkened. "They know I'm close," she said. Ethan stopped suddenly, crouching beside a half-buried crate. He pulled free a bundle of old mining charges, dusty but still functional. He glanced at Soraya. "We can slow them down." She gave a small, approving nod. "Do it," she said, working fast. Ethan set one charge along the wall, running the cable to a small trigger device. He remembered the old mining days when these were used to break rock. Now they would be used to break a hunt. They moved further down the tunnel. Leaving the charge hidden in shadow, the hunters' lights grew brighter, spilling into the passage. Ethan waited until they were close enough that he could hear the scrape of their armor. Then he pressed the trigger. The explosion shook the ground. Dust and rock filling the air, the tunnel behind them roared as part of the ceiling collapsed. Cutting off the hunters for now, Soraya grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. "It won't hold them for long," she said, and they kept moving. The tunnel ahead opened into a vast underground chamber, the ceiling so high it disappeared. Into darkness, old mining platforms hung from the walls, some broken and dangling, others still holding rusted machinery. The air here was cooler, filled with the faint hum of long-dead generators. Ethan guided Soraya toward an old service lift at the far side. Its cage-like frame still intact, but as they stepped inside, the faint sound of mechanical clicking echoed. From above, Ethan looked up and saw them, two drones descending on thin cables. Their scanner eyes glowing red. He raised his rifle. Firing before they could lock onto him, the first shot shattered one, sending it spinning into the dark. The second drone dodged, its red beam flashing across his chest. Soraya moved faster than he expected, leaping forward with her blade and slicing through the cable. The drone crashed to the ground, its light flickering out. But the noise had given them away, somewhere deeper in the tunnels. The hunters' voices grew louder, more urgent, the sound bouncing off the walls until it felt like it came from every direction. Ethan slammed the lift lever down, the old motor. Groaning to life, the cage shuddered and began to descend into the lower tunnels. The descent was slow, too slow. Ethan watched the shadows above, half expecting a hunter to leap down after them. But instead, a faint thud echoed from somewhere below. Soraya's head snapped toward the sound. "They're waiting beneath us," she said. Ethan cursed under his breath, forcing the lift to stop halfway down, the cage hanging over a wide shaft. "We jump," he said. Soraya didn't hesitate. She leaped to a nearby platform, rolling on impact. Ethan followed. Landing beside her with a grunt, the platform led to another tunnel, narrower and filled with broken pipes. Steam hissed from a few. Making the air damp and hot, they moved through. Quickly, the noise masking their footsteps. But it also masked something else, the sound of movement just ahead. They rounded a corner and froze. A figure stood in the middle of the tunnel, taller than Ethan. armored in dark plating with faint green lights along the chest. The helmet's faceplate reflected the glow of Ethan's flashlight. Soraya stiffened. Her blade lowering slightly. "Commander Drake," she whispered, her voice carrying both hate and fear. The hunter's voice was cold and deep. "You've run far, Soraya," he said. "But this is the end." Ethan stepped between them. "Rifle?" Raised, but Drake's gaze slid to him and the human. 20 years alone, you should have died quietly." Ethan didn't waste words, he fired. The shot slammed into Drake's shoulder, making him stagger, but the armor held. Drake moved fast for his size, swinging a long weapon that sparked against the tunnel wall. Ethan barely dodged. Soraya lunged in from the side, her blade striking at the gaps in the armor. The fight was brutal in the confined space, each swing and strike echoing loud in the narrow tunnel. Drake's blows were heavy, forcing Ethan back. Soraya moved like flowing water, attacking from angles. The hunter couldn't fully block, but even wounded, Drake was strong. Ethan saw an opening when Drake turned to block Soraya's strike. He stepped in close, jamming the rifle barrel under the hunter's chest plate and firing point blank. Drake roared in pain, stumbling back. Ethan grabbed Soraya's arm. "We move now," he said. They sprinted down the tunnel, leaving Drake's pained shouts behind. The fight had bought them only minutes. But in this deadly chase, minutes could mean survival. They didn't stop running until the tunnel curved sharply and opened into a small, half-collapsed chamber. The air here was cooler, damp, and carried the faint scent of moss. Ethan slowed, listening. The echoes of Drake's voice had faded. But he knew that didn't mean safety. The hunters were relentless. Soraya leaned against the wall, her breath quick but controlled. Ethan noticed the dark stain spreading across her thigh where the torn suit was wet with blood. "Sit," he said firmly. She started to protest, but his look silenced her. She lowered herself onto a piece of fallen metal, her eyes still scanning the shadows. Ethan knelt beside her, pulling a small medkit from his pack. His hands were rough and scarred, but steady. He tore open a packet of sealant foam and pressed it against the wound. She hissed softly, but didn't pull away. "It's not deep," he said, "but it'll slow you if we don't treat it right." She studied his face as he worked, as if memorizing each line and scar. "You've lived here all this time?" she said quietly. With no one, he gave a short nod. The others didn't make it. "Sickness, injuries, accidents?" "After a while, it was just me." Her eyes softened. "And you stayed alive, even without reason." Ethan didn't look up. "Survival is a reason." She was silent for a moment, then said, "In my world, survival alone is not enough. You need purpose. You need someone to fight for." Ethan's hands paused for just a second, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "And you?" he asked. "What's your purpose?" She looked away toward the tunnel entrance. "It used to be duty now. I think it's staying alive long enough to make them regret hunting me." There was steel in her voice. Ethan finished wrapping her leg, then stood, offering his hand. She took it without hesitation. Her grip strong despite the injury. "We keep moving," he said. The tunnel ahead was tighter, with roots breaking through the ceiling, some hanging down like dark fingers. The ground sloped upward, a sign they were heading toward the surface. Again, but every few steps, Ethan's mind kept replaying Drake's voice, the way he had spoken Soraya's name. Not like a target, but like someone he had once known well. As they climbed, Soraya spoke again. "Drake wasn't always a hunter. He was part of my fleet. He followed orders without question, even when they were wrong." Her tone was low, heavy with memory. "When I refused to destroy the human refugee ship, he turned against me, called me a traitor, and swore he'd bring me back dead or alive." Ethan listened quietly, the pieces of her story fitting together. She had risked her own life for humans before. Maybe that was why she had chosen him now. The tunnel narrowed again, forcing them to move single file, Ethan leading, his rifle ready. Suddenly, a faint flicker of light caught his eye ahead. He signaled for Soraya to stop. They crouched low as he crept forward, peering around the bend. A small scout drone hovered in the chamber ahead, scanning the walls, its soft hum filling the space. Ethan knew shooting it would give away their position, but leaving it meant it would find them. He stepped back, whispering to Soraya. "We need to take it quietly." She nodded, slipping past him, moving low and fast. Her movements were fluid. Almost silent, she came up behind the drone, grabbed its frame, and with one precise twist, snapped the cable that powered its core. The light died instantly. She lowered it to the ground without a sound. When she returned, there was a faint smile on her lips. "Still got it?" she murmured. They kept moving until the tunnel split again. One path leading up toward faint daylight, the other deeper into shadow. Ethan hesitated. "Up means faster escape," he said. "Down means more cover." Soraya thought for a moment. "Up, but carefully. Drake will expect us to hide." Not to risk the open ground, they climbed toward the light, the air growing fresher, but before they reached the exit, Soraya stopped, her hand gripping Ethan's shoulder. He followed her gaze, faint footprints in the dirt. Heavy, wide, fresh, she crouched, touching one. "Hunters," she said. "They know we're here." Ethan's mind moved quickly. They couldn't go back. And moving forward meant walking into a trap. He scanned the tunnel walls, spotting a narrow ventilation shaft half covered by loose stone. It was barely wide enough for a person, but it angled toward the surface. "There," he said. Soraya frowned. "It's tight." He gave a small smirk. Better tight than dead. They worked together, clearing the stones, the noise small but sharp in the still air. Ethan climbed first, pulling himself into the narrow space. Soraya followed close behind, the walls scraping their arms and legs as they moved upward. Every sound of their movement echoing faintly, halfway up. The muffled sound of voices reached them from below. Drake's deep tone carrying like a dark promise. "You can't run forever, Soraya." His voice seemed almost closer than before. Ethan didn't look back. "We're not running forever." He muttered under his breath, "Just long enough to get out." Soraya's reply was soft but certain. "Then we fight." They pushed upward, the faint daylight above growing stronger. Every inch closer to the surface felt like a stolen victory. But both of them knew, once they emerged, the real battle would begin. Ethan's hands broke through loose dirt, sunlight spilling across his fingers. The sudden brightness felt almost unreal after so long in the tunnels. He pulled himself up onto the rocky surface, the cold wind hitting his face like a sharp blade. Soraya climbed out right behind him, her silver skin catching the light in a way that made her seem almost unreal. For a moment, the world felt wider, freer. But the moment didn't last. A deep, mechanical hum rolled across the hillside. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his instincts telling him they weren't alone. He scanned the jagged cliffs and scattered boulders. Then he saw it, a dark figure stepping out from behind a stone ridge, armor gleaming under the sun, the green lights on his chest glowing brighter than before. Commander Drake. Soraya's jaw tightened, her blade already in her hand. Ethan raised his rifle, but Drake's voice carried over the wind, low and steady. "You've made me chase you through stone and shadow." "Soraya, but the chase ends here." Two more hunters appeared on either side of him, each carrying long curved weapons that pulsed with faint light. They fanned out slowly, boxing Ethan and Soraya in. There was no tunnel to run into now, no dark corner to hide in. Ethan shifted his stance, keeping his rifle aimed. "We're not going with you," he said, his voice like gravel. Drake's helmet tilted slightly. "You misunderstand. Human, you will die here, and she will be taken alive." The calm certainty in his voice made Ethan's grip tighten on the weapon. Soraya stepped forward. Just enough that the wind tugged at her torn suit. "You'll have to kill me first," she said. Her tone a mix of defiance and quiet rage. Drake gave a small, humorless laugh. That was always the plan. The wind grew stronger, pushing dust across the rocky ground. And then everything happened at once. Ethan fired, the shot hitting one of the side hunters in the chest, knocking him back. Soraya lunged forward, her blade flashing as she closed the distance with the other. Drake moved like a predator, fast for his size, his weapon swinging toward Ethan. The clash of steel, the crack of gunfire, and the roar of the wind blended into a storm of sound. Ethan dodged Drake's first swing. Feeling the rush of air as the weapon passed inches from his head, he countered with a rifle butt strike to the side of Drake's helmet. But the hunter barely staggered. Soraya moved like flowing water, each slash of her blade forcing her opponent back, sparks flying when metal met metal. Her movements were sharp, precise. But Ethan could see the strain in her injured leg. Every step a test of will. Drake pressed harder, his blows heavy enough to make Ethan's arms ache with each block. Ethan knew he couldn't win a test of strength, so he fought with movement, staying just out of reach, firing short, controlled bursts to keep Drake guessing. One of Soraya's strikes slipped past her opponent's guard, cutting deep into his side. He let out a choked cry and collapsed. She didn't stop to breathe, turning instantly toward Drake, joining Ethan in the fight. Now it was 2 against 1. But Drake fought like 3 men, his weapons spinning in arcs of deadly light, forcing Ethan and Soraya to move as one if they misstepped even once. It would be over. Ethan saw an opening when Drake raised his weapon high to block Soraya's strike. He stepped in close, jamming the rifle barrel into the joint of the hunter's armor, and fired. The impact made Drake stumble, his armor smoking where the bullet struck. Soraya didn't hesitate. She drove her blade toward the same spot. The metal shrieked as it split. Drake roared in fury, shoving them both back with a single, powerful strike. Ethan hit the ground hard, his rifle skidding out of reach. Drake advanced on Soraya, his weapon raised for the killing blow. Ethan scrambled to his knees, grabbing a jagged piece of rock without thinking. He hurled it at Drake's head. The rock struck the side of the helmet with a sharp crack. Buying just enough time for Soraya to roll away, Ethan rushed forward, slamming into Drake with his full weight, the two of them crashing to the ground. Drake's weapon spun away, clattering across the stones. Soraya was on her feet in an instant, her blade driving down toward Drake's chest, but Drake caught the blade in both hands, holding it inches from his heart. His strength was monstrous. The two of them locked in a deadly struggle. Ethan grabbed his fallen rifle and aimed at the gap in Drake's armor, the same place he had hit before. The shot thundered through the wind. Drake went still, the green lights on his chest flickering and fading. Soraya stepped back as the hunter slumped to the ground, unmoving. For a moment, the only sound was the wind carrying dust across the rocky slope. Ethan lowered his rifle, his breath ragged. Soraya stood beside him, her blade still in her hand, her eyes scanning the ridge for more enemies. But none came. Finally, she looked at him, her voice softer now. "You fought like someone who's been waiting 20 years. For a reason." He met her gaze. "Maybe I was." The fight was over for now. But Ethan knew the hunter's death would not end the danger. Somewhere out there, more would be coming, and this time, they would be ready for him too. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the rocky hills. The wind carried the smell of dust and burnt metal. Drake's body lay still where it had fallen, the faint green lights on his armor now completely dark. Ethan stood over him for a moment, his rifle hanging loosely at his side. He had spent 20 years on this planet, fighting only for his own survival. But now he had fought for something, someone else, and it felt different, heavier, but also strangely alive. Soraya walked a slow circle around the ridge, scanning the horizon for movement. When she was sure no other hunters were near, she returned to him, her steps quiet but certain. "They will come again," she said, her voice calm, not afraid. "Hunters do not forgive failure. And Drake's death will mark us both." Ethan gave a short nod. "Then we'll be ready," he said. They gathered what little they could from Drake's fallen men energy cells. It's a small water pack and a locator beacon that Soraya crushed under her boot without hesitation. Then they moved together toward the distant mountains, the fading light turning the sky into streaks of orange and deep blue as they walked. Ethan noticed Soraya's limp, the injury from earlier still slowing her. Without a word, he moved to her side. Letting her lean against him, she didn't argue. In fact, her posture softened slightly. "You are not what I expected," she said after a while. "When I first saw you from the trees, I thought you were only a man clinging to life in a dead world. But you are more." Ethan's voice was quiet when he replied, "Maybe I just needed a reason." Night began to fall, and they found shelter in a shallow cave at the base of a cliff. The stone walls blocked the wind and the faint sound of dripping. Water echoed inside. Ethan built a small fire, its glow casting warm light across the rough stone. Soraya sat near the flames, her silver skin reflecting the flicker, her eyes fixed on him as he worked. For a long moment, neither spoke, the fire popping softly between them. Then Soraya broke the silence, her voice low. "You should know what I meant. Back when I fell at your door." Ethan looked up, remembering her first words now. "Take me, human. You meant more than just saving you," he said slowly. She nodded, "Yes. I meant take me with you. Take me away from the chains, from the fear, from being hunted. I meant I would rather be yours than theirs." The words settled between them like something heavier than the stones above. Ethan's gaze didn't waver from hers. "I've been alone for a long time," he said quietly. "I didn't think I wanted anyone here with me, but maybe I was wrong." Soraya's lips curved into a small, rare smile. "You weren't wrong. You were just waiting for the right reason." She shifted closer to the fire, her voice softening. "Now you have one." The night deepened, the fires, warmth filling the small space. Ethan leaned back against the stone wall, exhaustion pulling at his muscles. Soraya moved closer, settling beside him, the heat from her skin surprising against the cold air. "You could leave when your people come," he said quietly. "They'll take you far from here." She shook her head slowly. "They might take us," she corrected, "if you want to come." He studied her for a moment, the way her eyes reflected the firelight, the way her tone carried no doubt. And he realized he believed her. "Then I'll come," he said simply. They sat in silence after that, the only sound the wind outside and the crackle of the flames. Ethan didn't feel the weight of the years anymore, the endless, empty nights, the long days of hunting and fixing tools just to survive. All of it seemed distant now, like a different life when the fire burned low. Soraya's head rested lightly against his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me, Ethan. Cain, you gave me more than my life back." She paused, her breath warm against his neck. "Now, take me, human this time." There was no desperation in her tone, no weakness. It was a vow, a choice. Ethan's arm went around her without thought, holding her close. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how soon the next hunt would come, but he knew this. He wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the stars filled the sky, sharp and bright against the darkness. Somewhere out there was the rest of the galaxy, dangerous and wide. But for the first time in 20 years, Ethan looked at it not as a prison, but as a place he might go And in that cold, hidden cave, with the warmth of another life beside him, he knew his days of silence were over.